Thank you for joining us today. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. John Barquet. Dr. John Barquet is a senior scientist at Ecolab, the world's leading provider of cleaning, food safety, and infection prevention products and services. Dr. Barquet has a PhD in urban entomology and leads Ecolab Pest Elimination's product evaluation and development projects, specializing in developing effective, integrated pest management programs that deliver high-quality pest protection while limiting environmental impact. He is an expert on a wide range of pest elimination techniques for food and beverage processing, food service, hospitality, and related industries. Please take it away, Dr. John.
Thank you very much, Jen, and welcome everybody. Today we're going to be covering off on filth flies as well as an update on the Zika and mosquitoes, particularly around food service environments. As many of you know, that's been pretty hot in the press lately, and I think that people on the call here would appreciate an update on that as well. So we'll go ahead and cover off starting with filth flies. And these, of course, include the common house fly, but there are other flies that we consider to be filth flies and technically, public health hazards in terms of getting these insects in food service and food handling environments. So there's a variety of species. The common house fly is the most common, hence its name. But there's also flesh flies, which feed on carrion or rotting meat, and then we've got bottle flies here, which can be seen around garbage areas. They like decaying organic matter. Blowflies, very hairy-looking flies, all about the same size, but they all are breeding and feeding in unsanitary environments. And most of the time, let's hope anyway, that they are breeding outdoors. These typically will not be breeding indoors. There are flies that can do that in your facilities, and many of you are probably familiar with fruit flies, which can breed indoors. But these are particularly coming in from the outside. And if you're in a rural location, particularly close to livestock raising communities, these flies can be much more prevalent. So these are the ones that we need to be worried about. I'll get into a little bit more detail about their biology and their behavior. So there are 4 life stages for these flies, and the eggs, the larva, the pupa, and the adult. The eggs are generally take about 8 to 20 hours to hatch after they've been laid by the female. Female filth flies can generally lay between 200 and 500 eggs in their lifetime, so a huge breeding capacity. And then the larvae, also called maggots, they will molt into several sizes before becoming the pupa. And the pupa is the dormant stage. And then once that's gone through about 3 days or so, the adult fly will emerge. So very good at reproducing and generally very unsanitary environments. The housefly in particular, when we consider the livestock areas, is breeding in manure. And manure is 70% bacteria, so we can immediately see how important these are in terms of vectoring foodborne illness. So filth flies are generally seasonal pests, and in the United States, it starts in April, so when things start to warm up, and then and April through November. But when we get into colder climates, it can be June, July when it starts. Temperatures need to be above 70 degrees Fahrenheit for the best breeding potential for the flies. Below 60 degrees Fahrenheit, they do not reproduce very well, and then they will overwinter in the pupa, or it depends on the species, but they can overwinter as adults as well, and they'll look for cracks and crevices to do that. So in terms of food safety, of course, you need to be worried about your brand, and with the media and the social media in particular, pest presence within a food handling facility is just something that we can't tolerate for the food safety reasons as well as your reputation. So flies are known to carry more than 100 different pathogens, including those that cause the foodborne illness, Salmonella and E. coli, and they're mechanical carriers of disease. And what that means is they're carrying these organisms on the outsides of their bodies. I'll explain what these strange-looking organs are here in a minute. But we're talking about the feet, the sponging mouth part, as the primary ways that these are being carried around. You can see in addition to the foodborne pathogens, there's a variety of other pathogens that they're capable of carrying and have been shown and documented to carry these diseases. So this is a bottle fly, and you see it by its metallic color. There's also copper ones that are that way, and they're related, very similar to house flies, breeding in garbage, pretty much vegetable material. They can breed in compost piles, places like that. So a wide variety of situations they can breed in. And when they land on a surface, they season that surface with anything else that they've been visiting. So we'll start with the mouth part here, and you can see what's called a sponging mouth part. And we're going to take a look at the head of the filth fly here. And this is the sponging mouth part. It's retracted right now, but they have a reflex. Every time they land on a surface, they will taste that surface, and that's what makes them particularly good at transporting as well as dropping off these bacteria. So this is a scanning electron microscope picture, and we're getting in a little closer here. This is once the mouth part begins to become protracted, we're going to take a look and zoom in even closer to these areas. And what we can see is some filth on the various grooves and such that are within the mouth part, and basically called pseudotrachea, if we want to get technical about that. But let's move in and look in really close now. We're up to about 2,000 times magnification, and what we see is what we don't want on any of our other surfaces is bacteria. It's difficult to say what the species of bacteria is just by looking at it. But you can see it's quite prevalent in this particular example, and this is a fly that we pictured at our R&D facility using our scanning electron microscope. But there's lots of publications on this. This one is the American Journal of Tropical Medicine, and this was from a housefly taken from a livestock breeding facility, and the bacteria was identified as E. coli, and you can just see the large masses. And as I mentioned, they do breed and feed on manure in these areas, so that's where they're picking up the bacteria. I know this is very delicious for all of you that are eating lunch right now. So this is another type of bottle fly. You can see the metallic look to it. So, but just like the house flies and other filth flies, they also carry around diseases on their feet. So this is the tarsus or foot of the common house fly, and I'll show it to you at another orientation here. This is the tarsal claw. And it is what's capable of grabbing onto rough surfaces, such as wood. And then we've got the pulvillus, which is a sticky organ, and this can grab onto smooth surfaces. So as you've probably seen, flies are very comfortable landing and sticking to any surface, including ceilings, walls, and they do prefer to rest most of the time about 2 meters or 6 feet up on the walls. And that's important in understanding when you have a fly program in your facility, where you want to position your light traps, and we'll get into some details about that. But these are the organs that also, in addition to the mouth part, can pick up the bacteria. If we move in really close to the pulvillus, the tenets setae are like little suction cups on the foot. So again, very sticky organs and capable of picking up filth as they move around. So also there's something we call Fliespeck, which is vomitus as well as their, the feces and such. Again, they have to when they land on a surface, they're going to taste it, but in order to feed, they have to first regurgitate. And so they have to dissolve the food before they lap it back up. So you can think about that in terms of mode of transmission and how important that is. When your pest management provider visits your facility, they're going to inspect for the sanitary conditions and such, but this is called Fliespeck, and this is a drop ceiling in a restaurant. So flies like cracks and crevices. They like to be up on edges, and in large numbers you will see this deposited. Fruit flies can also do this, so it's the area the pest management provider might be looking for targeted insecticide treatments. So again, these are going to be done 2 meters or above. That's typically where the flies are resting in a restaurant, and they rest about 60% of the time. When they forage for food, they're generally foraging lower than that, so they're looking for food scraps lower. Very adapted to the human habitat. They've been with us for thousands of years as we've been raising livestock, so they're very adapted to these environments and finding their way in, finding food and water sources. So in your fly program, and I think it's very important for every restaurant to have a fly program because although they're seasonal, it's something that we can keep at bay, and there's science behind how we do that. Generally, it is an outside-in approach, so we're looking for sanitary, unsanitary conditions outside, gaps, holes, and such that they're getting into the building. What is your door policy? Many restaurants have an open door policy, which is nice, but that can also allow the flies to get in. So there's definitely exclusion opportunities that we can do, and some treatments that we can do outside as well around the dumpster and garbage area that will keep at least 50% of the flies from even getting inside. Then once inside, it's targeted insecticide treatments to the areas where the flies are landing above a shoulder height, and we prefer to get that above 6 feet so that it's out of reach of patrons. Of course, children are getting all over the place, so we want to make sure there's nothing that they're going to be coming into contact with. And we can take advantage of the fly's behavior when we do that by making these treatments out of reach of your customers. So outside-in approach, it's not just for flies, of course. You've got other pests that you're dealing with. So rodents, it's very critical that we have good door sweeps. We've got the holes, gaps around utility lines, everything sealed because they'll take advantage of that, in addition to the flies being able to get in. Flies are very good at lighting around the doorways. They're attracted to the odors and the heat. And when people open the doors, they'll quickly move inside. They can also come in the back entryway when deliveries are being made and such. So very, very, very close to fly season here, so we can expect for those things to start happening. There are some things that we can do for flies in terms of removing their sources of food around the facility. Removing water is very important for a variety of pests, including the flies, and then harborage sites for other pests such as rodents. And they'll also be inspecting for ants, and for those of you in the southern tier of the United States, you're dealing with paradomestic cockroaches. These are larger species that come in from the outdoors, so all of these should be part of a pest program. So what you and your pest management provider can do, it should be a partnership. There's no silver bullet. There's no single thing that can be done. It has to be a variety of things that you're working together on. So locate and eliminate breeding sites. Well, of course, that's going to be the garbage area, so that needs to be well maintained. There can be animal droppings or manure, as we talked about. Grass clippings can ferment, so if they're bagged and the bags are left open, those are very attractive to bottle flies in particular. So very good seal on the garbage. It needs to be removed regularly so it's not piling up. And then we want to reduce the fly entrance opportunities. So reduce the attractants. That's going to be the garbage. So that, again, that needs to be well bagged up. Keep the doors closed as much as you possibly can. It's good to have vestibules on restaurants, so there's 2 entrances, 2 doorways that people go through, and that tends to reduce the fly pressure. Air doors are common in the back above the entry door, and there are also air doors for drive-through windows, and they're particularly designed to deliver a column of air that keeps the flies from wanting to enter the facility. And then once inside, plastic stripping, fly strips as they're sometimes called, to keep fly movement within the facility limited. Make sure that the employee break areas are in good shape and you know they're well maintained. Now pesticide applications will be necessary, but as we talked about, they're going to be to the resting site, so they're not going to be applied all over the place. At least they shouldn't be. They should be targeted to where the flies are landing and resting most of the time, and that will be done by your pest management provider. We do not recommend that store employees or staff make pesticide applications. In some states, you have to have a license to apply any pesticide within a commercial facility, so be aware of your state regulations if you do, say, have some aerosols or such that you might be using. And then harvest or kill the flies after they get inside. Light traps, I'll get into some details around that. There are some sticky traps that can be used, and really a light trap that uses glue boards is preferred because it captures the flies and does not allow particulates and such to be moved around. Zappers or electrocution type fly lights should be limited to areas where there's not going to be risk of contamination, because studies have shown that the bacteria is actually released once those flies are zapped. So Use the lights with UV light. Ultraviolet light is attractive. And then fly swatters, we don't recommend them. They cause splatter and such like that. And then there will be pesticide applications that your pest management provider will do to reduce the fly pressure. So as you can see, there's a lot of things that need to be done in concert with each other to really reduce that fly pressure. And a big thing is the doors. That's how they're getting in, of course. Also make sure your screens on your windows are in good shape. It can be difficult in a restaurant to have positive air pressure out the doors because of the hoods that you use for above your grills and such. So those are going to really cause a negative air pressure, and it's difficult to overcome that. But that is something that will also facilitate flies getting in. Air doors we've talked about in the back as well as over the drive-through, if you have a drive-through, and then the strip doors or the plastic strips that reduce fly movement inside. So if you ask the question, is there a problem here? And I think most of you would agree that the garbage here is not being put out, at least not frequently enough to be removed. And so if the garbage stays around for longer than a week, then the flies can breed in that. Same within your restaurant. If soil and such, especially organic debris that can serve as food source for both filth flies as well as fruit flies, is not regularly cleaned up, then you can have flies breeding indoors as well. So make sure your garbage is picked up on at least a weekly basis, and we don't overfill the dumpsters. You need to be able to close the lid. They shouldn't be leaking. They should be in good repair. This is an example of bad practices here. We've got spilled garbage, and pictured here is a mass of eggs on a piece of carrion. So these are fly eggs. A fly came and laid a mass of eggs, and you're going to have flies breeding at this location. So make sure that you don't have this particular type of situation happening at your restaurant. Also, water sources. There can be standing water that can be a problem with a variety of insect species, and there's large as well as small fly species that can breed in these areas. And even though some of these might not be a health concern, particularly like the ones we've been talking about, they can still be a nuisance. There's a variety of small flies. We talked about fruit flies, but there's also fungus gnats, which are very common now in the springtime. They can get through the screens, even very small screens. They're small flies. And then there can be forward flies, which are also called drain flies. They can breed in your drains, and these breed in very sewer-like conditions. So different species that you have to deal with, but if you can keep the standing water at bay, good drainage, do the best you can to do that, and you'll reduce your pest pressure. Now, in terms of exterior treatment, your pest management provider can put out some very fast-acting insecticides. And residual insecticide, what we mean by that is it goes on as a wet spray, and it's targeted to where the flies are landing, or would likely land. And by definition, a residual spray lasts after it dries, and it can last for weeks, of course, depending on the weather. And the rain conditions will depend on how well they last, but they can be placed in areas where the rain weather probably won't affect them as much. Shown here in the lower right picture here is a device that Ecolab invented called the Stealth Fly Station. And flies are attracted to the color black. They are attracted to black probably because it's an indication that this could be a food source, an animal or such from their evolution. So this is a patented design. It uses the black color, of course. It also has an attractant that is being placed in here by the service specialist. And then a residual insecticide is placed around the perimeter of this device. The females will smell the fermenting material, and they will be attracted to it knowing it's a place to lay eggs. And the males will be attracted to it with that smell knowing that the females are coming. So there's really good science behind this. It's also got a shiny center, which we believe is an optical illusion to the fly that it is an entrance. So this allows for what we call a spot treatment, which is a 2 square foot area which is required by many pesticide labels. We can't make a very broadcast insecticide applications anymore. By law, we're very limited in what we can do today compared to what we used to be able to do. So this allows for a very targeted application, drawing flies to the area so we can reduce the amount of pesticide we use. This device would be placed close to where the flies are attracted to in the first place. So it would be back of the house, outside, near the dumpster corral, So we've already got the flies coming to that area, and it can really help to improve insecticide treatments that are done in those locations. This device did receive a Kitchen Innovation Award from the National Restaurant Association. So technology, we got to be using it, and there's good science behind it, and then there's a lot of myths out there too. So make sure we're using science-based solutions and working together in partnership on these. Now, in terms of light traps, this is an example of an electrocution trap I was talking about. It uses different colored bulbs. That basically ultraviolet is attracted to the flies. Different spectrums are attractive to different insects, but in this case we've got two different colored bulbs. Both would be attracted to the flies. And this will zap the flies, so we don't want this in a food handling area where it's going to scatter bacteria as it does so. So you want more of the glue board-based type fly traps. This is the case of the Ecolab Stealth Light, reflects ultraviolet light off of the wall, so it's more decorative. Your customers won't necessarily know what it is. They can't see the flies inside that are captured on the glue board. For fly season, generally about 6 months. In the cooler areas in the southern United States, it's possible to have flies year-round, but they are still generally seasonal. We recommend the bulbs be changed on an annual basis of use. So if you've only got a 6-month program, the bulbs don't need to be changed until about every 2 years. So that's just a general guideline to make sure that they have the right emission and output to attract the flies. These lights should be placed at 2 meters up or so, because that's where the flies are going to be rested, most drawn to, as well as keeping it out of way of traffic, so within your facility, so that people aren't running into it. And it may not be placed, according to food code, it may not be placed any closer than 10 feet to a food preparation surface, because you don't want flies being drawn right over to where food is being prepared. So outside-in approach, definitely the inspections are a very important part of it, making sure that we understand where the flies are getting in, where they're breeding, and where the proper light placement as well as insecticide treatments need to be made. And then exterior, we talked about our stealth fly station, but there will also be treatments made to the dumpster itself and other surfaces where the flies may be landing. And then interior spot treatment. There's that spot word again. That means it can't be any more than 2 square feet in a particular area. Generally, these are going to be done to drop cords, darker surfaces that the flies are being drawn to, and where we see the fly speck. So all of this is very important from learnings from the inspection. So that's all I had on flies. Make sure that you're submitting your questions, because there will be Q&A at the end on the Filth Flies. Happy to answer those. But I did want to cover off on mosquitoes, because that's something that's been in the news lately, and many of you probably do have outdoor dining facilities. Some of you may be calling in from resorts where you've got big potential for mosquitoes to be breeding. So what's been in the news lately is Zika, and it's a disease that's been around for a while, but it is beginning to explode in certain areas of the world, particularly Latin America, Brazil, so the warmer climates, and it is a mosquito-borne viral infection, and there are 2 species that are particularly important in that. I'll cover a little bit more detail on them, but Aedes aegypti and Aedes albopictus, and these are daytime feeders. They can be out at night as well. They're opportunistic feeders, so they'll feed a little bit on you, they'll feed on a little bit of your friend at the table, and very common in urban environments. We've got potential for these species to vector the Zika virus. We got about 3 or 4 million cases of Zika are projected to occur in the next year. What's interesting about it is only about 1 in 5 people will develop symptoms. So you can have the disease, but you won't develop symptoms. I'll go through what those are. Usually it takes 2 to 7 days after the mosquito bite. What is particularly concerning and has been in the media is microcephaly that has been now conclusively linked to the Zika virus. The Center for Disease Control has the science behind showing that Zika can be infected during pregnancy to the child, and it causes basically a small head, and these children have very numerous problems throughout their lives because of this. So it's a serious birth defect, and something that we need to protect ourselves from. Okay, so Now, we've got a variety of diseases in addition to Zika that are important, and some of them are much, Zika is rarely deadly. It causes flu-like symptoms, rash and such, aches. It basically feels like the flu, but in addition, it can cause some neurological problems later, and as we talked about, the microcephaly. But there's dengue, chikungunya. These are also vectored by Aedes. So the Aedes albopictus and aegypti. And then Aedes aegypti is called the yellow fever mosquito. We used to have yellow fever here in the United States, but it's been eradicated. Malaria is the #1 killer, and mosquitoes are the most deadly insect on Earth. Malaria kills about 1 million people every year. And then in my neck of the woods, but it can be in other parts of the United States, I'm up in Minnesota, a little cooler, we've got Culex pipiens, which is the species we have here. It can cause West Nile virus and encephalitis. And then for those of us that love our pets, our dogs and cats, there's a variety of mosquito species that will cause heartworm in dogs and cats. So we should be protecting those every year. There's treatments that we can do for our animals to protect them from the heartworm. Essentially what the mosquito does is it feeds on an infected animal. It's got microfilaria or microscopic worms that the mosquito takes up and then transfers to another animal. And if that animal is not protected, the worms develop in the heart. They grow to as long as 14 inches, and it is deadly for the animal. So make sure you're protecting your pets as well as yourselves in areas where these diseases are at risk. So in terms of the species of mosquito, we've got the Aedes aegypti, which is the primary vector for Zika, and this is where we have potential in the United States for the disease to be cropping up. So far, there have been people that have been found to have it, but those have been, most of those have been from traveling outside the United States. So if you happen to go to the hospital, you have to go in for anything, one of the first questions they're going to ask you is, have you been outside of the United States? Because as it was with Ebola, they want to make sure that those things aren't being transmitted in. Then the albopictus is a little bit more territory, can also vector Zika, as well as some of those other diseases that we talked about. So what are the symptoms? Again, about 1 in 5 people are going to be infected. It's fever, rash, joint pain, or conjunctivitis, or pink eye. They're mild, typically. Hospitalization's uncommon, and deaths are very rare. But because of the causal relationship between Zika and that birth defect, as well as neurological syndromes, there's Gillian's syndrome that's been linked to neurological effects, thought to be caused by flu-like viruses, but now apparently can also be caused by the Zika virus. So this is what we need to pay attention to in terms of safety, preventing risk, raising awareness of the risk factors is what we're trying to do for you today. Eliminating their breeding grounds, that's something that a professional or government municipalities will get involved with, and you've seen Obama has put a lot of money towards this, so it's something that's being taken very seriously. And then that's something that you would work with your pest management provider on. These mosquitoes can be breeding from miles away, so there's things that can be done to reduce risk. It's not capable to eliminate them, but we can significantly reduce the risk. And protect yourself. Protect yourself by wearing light clothing. Mosquitoes are attracted to the color black, so black is very attractive to them. Use insect repellents while outdoors. DEET is a very good repellent, and it's something that you need to put on your exposed skin. Be careful around the eyes and the mouth. And if you're going to put on sunscreen, put on the sunscreen first, and then put on the repellent, and it will protect you from the mosquitoes. There's lotions, there's sprays, there's rub-on materials. I use Cutter, and Cutter is a very high concentration, but it's something that I use because I do a lot of outdoor activities. So if you're out there, protect yourself because especially in the areas or parts of the world where these diseases are prevalent, you're going to want to do that. And then we talked about CDC recommendations as the disease has been linked to the microcephaly. So they can be spread, pregnant woman to her unborn baby. So what they recommend is women who are pregnant in any trimester consider postponing travel to any area where the Zika virus occurs. Consult with your doctor before going to any of these areas. and they'll give you the correct materials. Make sure that you're protecting yourself because the risk is there for that to happen. Now, this is how Ecolab can help. As you've seen in our video and such in the upfront, we're involved in a lot of ways of clean, healthy, safe environments. So pest elimination is a part of that, and we do have global customers. Some of you may have global presence. Ecolab has global presence in the countries shown here. In North America, we just launched our mosquito program down in the southern tier of the United States where Zika is most at risk. So we have solutions for that, and there is an entire program put together that can reduce the risk of mosquitoes at your facility. And there are things that we can do for temporary events such as weddings, and really, if there's going to be outdoor events, there should be some sort of action taken to reduce the mosquitoes, and there's a variety of tools to help us do that. We also have mosquito programs currently available in Southeast Asia, China, Middle East, and Africa. And then Latin America, we have a mosquito program currently available. As many of you know, we've got the Olympics coming up in Brazil, so there's a lot of protection that needs to go on in that area, as well as Central America. So that's basically what we have. I can answer specific questions if you have any. I know some of you probably have outdoor dining where these mosquitoes are going to be a particular nuisance. There's things we can do to draw mosquitoes away from your customers, and treatments that we can do to knock the adult population down on a temporary basis. Or on a contract basis, we can be out there to keep the mosquitoes at bay during mosquito season. So these are your additional resources, and there's a lot out there. The CDC, the World Health Organization, they have the best information out there, and we also have a public health site on ecolab.com which covers off on these. So make sure you take advantage of that, especially if you're going to be doing any traveling, to be sure you're taking the proper precautions. So with that, I will take any questions.
All right, our first question. What pesticides are available that are effective in killing flies?
There's a variety of insecticides that are available. And again, the pest management professional should be the one making those applications. They're going to have the proper protection equipment for themselves, the application equipment, as well as understanding of the labels, the laws, and the regulations. And since they're going to be applying in a commercial facility, they need to have a license and proper certification. There's different classes of insecticide. There's ones that can be used to knock down the flies once they're inside. These are typical aerosol-like applications. So you've got, there can be equipment for doing this as well as aerosols themselves. Those are very temporary. Those will just knock down the population that's in there. They break down very quickly. The pyrethrins, as it's called, is very commonly used. That has a half-life of about 15 minutes. So it degrades very quickly, especially in sunlight or even natural light. Then there's pyrethroids, which are longer-lasting insecticides, and most of these do need to be applied by a professional. That's what they're targeting, the surfaces where the flies are landing. So a fly just needs to land on that for a short period of time, and they pick up a lethal dose, and they drop very quickly.
All right, our next question. How do you draw mosquitoes away from an outdoor dining area?
There are traps that are available, and what they do is they use carbon dioxide as the primary attractant. There's also some that have chemical, octanoic acids and such that's in our sweat. But typically it's a carbon dioxide trap that will be placed in areas that will draw the mosquitoes away from the dining area. There can also be targeted insecticide applications to foliage, to eaves and shaded areas where the adults may be landing. Again, all of this needs to be considered during the inspection. In terms of eliminating their breeding sources, it's very difficult for a small facility. Chances are the mosquitoes are coming from off property, and in that case, we have to work in concert with your neighbors as well as the local municipalities to get the government involved if we need to do more widespread control. But there is things that can be done to reduce the activity within your facility. If it's a large resort property where mosquitoes are breeding, there are applications of larvicides where we've got the the larvae breeding on the basically stagnant water areas that are identified. We can apply larvicides there to reduce the breeding on that property. But if it's a smaller property, chances are your mosquitoes are coming from somewhere else. So there's very targeted applications we need to do, and much of that is going to be using these traps, which help to draw the mosquitoes away from the area where the guests are dining.
All right, and now we're getting a few questions on sanitation. So one is in regards to should dumpsters be cleaned, and maybe if you have any tips on that, and also how to clean Fliespeck.
Yeah, and you know, any good industrial detergent can be used for this, and now it's up to you whether you want your staff applying sanitizers and such like that, because some of these can, you know, you have to wear your personal protection equipment. They can be corrosive to the eyes. So any good detergent can be used. Dumpsters should be cleaned and do the best that you can to keep any spillage from happening. And as long as that's being cleaned on a weekly basis, you won't have flies breeding in that area. So it's good to keep those up on a maintenance program. Fliespeck can be removed by a simple detergent and such like that. So those types of chemicals are widely available. The things that you normally use in your kitchen cleaning will work just fine.
Okay, and are there any natural enemies for house flies?
Actually, there are, but they wouldn't be used around your facility because they're not breeding, at least in large numbers. These are typically used in the farming community, the livestock, people raising livestock, where there's a lot of manure. They will release parasitic wasps, and these little wasps will hunt out the pupa of the fly within the manure, and they do really a nice job of dropping the population of flies in those areas, but they have to be released on a regular basis, and no insecticides should be applied because they'll kill the parasitic wasps. So there are farmers that use these with great success, but unfortunately they're not used, or cannot be used in an urban environment.
Why are vector-borne diseases increasing worldwide? Is insecticide resistance increasing?
Well, in terms of mosquitoes, that's a great question. When we talk about mosquitoes in particular, yes, insecticides have been used for many, many years to drop mosquitoes, and we are seeing some resistant populations because of constant exposure happening in parts of the world. We're not seeing that here so much in North America, but you know, a particular concern is the climate change, and we are seeing increases in temperature that are going to be conducive to these species. So if you think about Europe, the United Kingdom, their climate is such that it's not conducive to these diseases because the mosquito species aren't there. But if those areas were to get warmer, and that's why we're keeping an eye on the southern U.S., particularly Florida and those areas, where they are approaching the capability to have these tropical type diseases, and that could even include things like malaria coming into the U.S. So, yeah, we keep an eye on it, but the thought is because of the climate and the warming of the planet that we will see an increase in vector-borne diseases. Very good question.
Do you know what the incubation period for the Zika virus is?
About 7 days. So after being fed upon by the mosquito, if you're going to have symptoms, they'll show up in about a week.
How long can a housefly live?
Really not very long. The adult housefly, their sole purpose is really to breed and reproduce. So 2 to 3 weeks, and that's about enough to produce all the eggs in the female's lifetime, and that's all they need.
We have a problem with fruit flies in our restaurants. Are there documented cases of fruit flies causing foodborne outbreak in restaurants?
No, that's a great question too, because you think about where they're breeding in areas, and there's different species of fruit fly. The dark-eyed fruit fly is the most common that we see in restaurants today. It used to be the red-eyed fruit fly. We still have those, but the dark-eyed are larger. They're more prevalent, and they can be more mobile, so they're much more noticeable by your customers. And it's the true bar fly. I mean, it's breeding in yeast materials that are fermenting on the floors and the garbage can. So it's possible that they could. It's never been documented that they can do this, but when you think about where they breed and feed, it's really a good idea. Maintain that sanitation. An area the size of your thumb can produce thousands of fruit flies if it's organic matter. So it's not just going to be the bar area, though. There's, again, this is where your pest management professional will help you identify the source, because fruit flies can breed indoors, and it doesn't take very much to produce a lot of them. So attention to detail and sanitation, and then work with your pest management provider in case insecticide treatments are also necessary.
Do flea and tick collars protect animals from mosquitoes?
You know, there's probably going to be some protection from that because of the nature of the insecticide. But because where they're placed, you know, the head in the area is going to be the areas where most commonly we see the ticks, especially. But it depends on where the mosquito decides to feed. So at least it won't stop the mosquito from feeding if it is a systemic insecticide, which is you know, something similar to what we would use for heartworm in the animals. There's actually an ivermectin which does kill the animal, but they have to feed first for that to happen. So I wouldn't say that you get a lot of protection from flea and tick collars, but you know, they can't hurt.
All right, this next question is specific to the stealth system. It says, I'm not sure if it's the station or the light.
Okay.
So it says, how far away is the stealth system effective from a fly's resting spot?
So let's talk about the stealth fly station first, which would be outside. Again, you want to place this close to an area where they're already attracted. We don't want to put that at the front entrance or a place like that because it can attract flies to, you know, the doors and maybe even make them go inside. So put that where, and we will make a decision as to where that needs to be placed. But as soon as they get into that area, there's going to be a zone where that fermenting material will be noticed by the flies. So within several feet to you know, a few yards, the flies will be drawn to that. So it's important to put it in those places where the flies are drawn to in the first place. For lights inside, about 6 to 12 feet is the attractive zone for the fly lights. And there's different sizes. There's going to be different brightnesses of bulbs depending on the unit that you get. But for the stealth itself, and there's the stealth maxima, which has the larger output, generally within about 12 feet or so, the flies are going to be immediately drawn. Now, they're going to be searching around, and the ultraviolet light looks like an exit to them. So placement is key as to where we see the flies landing or attracted to in the first place. And again, we cannot put that fly light over a food handling surface where food's being prepared. So again, making sure we're strategically placing those lights where they're going to be most effective.
All right, and it looks like we have one last question, unless anyone else would like to send one in. We noticed that during the winter months, the fruit flies drastically reduce in numbers or are absent until the springtime. Does that mean they are originating from the outside?
Oh, they certainly can come from the outside. These species do breed outdoors, especially in the warmer areas. But it's probably related more to floor temperature. As the season cools, the floor temperatures get below 50 degrees in some cases. They get very cold. And then those floor areas are really the most common areas where the fruit flies tend to breed. So once the temperature gets to those cooler temperatures, they can no longer reproduce. And then once that floor starts to warm up during the spring and the summer months, that's when we really can see these populations explode. All right, well, we don't have any more questions coming in, so I appreciate everybody's attendance here. Thank you for your time and attention. And there will be a recording of this presentation that will be available this Friday. And there's the website to get that. So make sure I'll give you a little moment to take that down. And then we will also be offering continuing education certificates. So please answer the survey following today's webinar. And this is also where you can request these continuing education certificates. and that should be very helpful to many of you. So September is Food Safety Month for this year. Our next quarterly webinar will be held August 16th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, and the topic is going to be Thoughts for Food Safety Education Month. So look forward to that in August. So thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to speaking with you on August 16th.